critical of you.
Are you gonna laugh?
I've been hearing symphonies. Before all I heard was silence.
Hello?
He knows what to say, but he just having trouble saying it.
Am I invisible? Have a good long look.
How long have you got?
I don't mind disability, but I don't want to deal with it at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, for God's sake!
Our ability to adapt is phenomenal.
Please don't tackle me.
You can do it, but it's whether that injury holds him back.
This is my little terrible strip.
Whatever it took, we were going to win.
I think you should do whatever empowers you.
Watch me do it.
I refuse to let it define me.
This is me.
Yes! Nothing about us without us.
Inclusion is something everybody wants.
Fantastic. That gives you a little flavour of on screen what the BBC is doing, and I'm delighted that everybody has stayed for this session who's in the room at the minute, because I'm delighted to be here, but I'm also quite proud to be here because I work for this organisation and I really want to find out what the BBC has done and what the BBC plans to do in the future. We're going to show another film shortly, and that will illustrate some more of the work that the organisation has done on screen. But of course, it's much more than that. We're a massive employer, both within the organisation and outside. So we'll talk about that as well. And we have our lovely panel, and we will introduce them in a short time. But first of all, we're delighted to have the controller of BBC Northern Ireland, Adam Smith, to give us our keynote speech. Adam.
Thank you very much, Tara. Good morning. Could I begin by thanking Harkin for the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of the BBC. It's an absolute privilege to be here. I have had a wonderful career in the BBC for almost 27 years. I strongly believe in the corporation and what it stands for, but for a considerable chunk of the early years of my career, disability inside the corporation was almost completely invisible. It's not that the recruitment of disabled people was discouraged, it's that their potential was ignored. And I think disabled people did not consider broadcasting as a career which was open to them. Thankfully, all of that is changing. The issue of recruitment has been particularly acute in Northern Ireland, where disabled people represent 1/5 of the 16 to 64-year-old population, but they have the lowest employment rate in the entire UK. Coupled with this lack of opportunity in the labour market, the early years of my BBC career coincided with the most narrow and reductive view of what kind of person makes a good broadcaster. I started in news, and the early 1990s marked the zenith of the US TV news networks. Their anchors and reporters were all tanned, good-looking, great hair, perfect teeth, and no doubt, perfect bodies. Thankfully, that mindset is also changing. Our shapes, sizes, perfections, and imperfections are now far less important than they have ever been. What counts is much deeper. It's our curiosity about the world, our eye for a story, our dogged determination to get to the bottom of something, and our acumen. And with disability in mind, what counts for us as a significant employer in UK broadcasting is how we can remove the barriers to employment for those with talent who should not be denied access to the creative industries due to any impairment. So, what is the BBC doing to improve access to work for those with disabilities? Well, our ambition is to create an organisation which reflects more accurately the society we serve. The Director General has been clear. We must move away from any sense of a BBC type and individual leaders should not hire in their own image. We want a corporation made up of 50% women, at least 20% Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff members, and at least 12% of disabled colleagues. Alongside this, we have a new workforce target of 25% of staff coming from working class backgrounds by 2027, as well as ensuring we are truly inclusive for all of our LGBTQ+ employees. Our diversity and inclusion plan sets out our ambition to become the industry gold standard for workplace diversity and inclusion. Now, as I've already said, those with a disability in Northern Ireland account for 20% of our population, but our benchmark inside the BBC is just 12%. But that's still a stretching target because it takes time to bring about significant change in a workforce the size of the BBC's. But there's also a cultural barrier. In my experience as a leader and as a manager in the BBC, there are many staff members with hidden disabilities. That is to say, they don't want to be judged by their disabilities. Understandably, they want to be judged by the quality of their work when compared to their non-disabled colleagues, and therefore they tend to keep disabilities secret. But we must create workplace cultures in which staff members feel free and supported to do their best work, while at the same time capturing the full level of support they may need to do the job to the very best of their ability. That kind of inclusive atmosphere assists with data collection, which in turn gives us a truer picture of the makeup of our staff base and helps us to ensure that the workforce is truly representative of the audience we serve. To finish, some of our key pledges in our diversity and inclusion plan include expanding the pool of diverse senior leaders, setting a gold standard for inclusion, empowering our staff network, such as BBC Ability, which is there to support and encourage disabled people working for the BBC, transforming recruitment by hiring for potential, career development for all, taking an accessible first approach across our business, and working towards attaining the government's Disability Confident Leader level, Level 3 status. We have a long way to go, but we've also come a long way. In 2024, BBC Northern Ireland will mark its centenary. What began as a little radio service reaching thousands is now a cross-platform service reaching millions every week. Our mission remains unchanged: to offer fair and impartial news and to inform, educate and entertain. You don't need to be a BBC type. You just need to share the vision. Thank you.
Adam, thanks very much indeed. Before we see our next film, I'd like to ask the panellists to introduce themselves, starting with Alan.
Hi, I'm Alan McKillop. I'm the Disability Workforce Strategy Lead at the BBC. I'm responsible for Pan BBC for fronting all disability-related strategy that affects people coming in their employment journey from when they start right through the business until they leave.
Fantastic. Alan, great to have you here today. Kerry.
Hello, good morning everyone. Lovely to see you. I'm Kerry Burnell and I am the BBC's Ambassador for Disability, and I work as part of the Diversity and Inclusion team. And really my remit is to try and ensure that our disability portrayal across all of our amazing content is really authentic.
We'll see your film shortly. Charmin.
Hi, I'm Charmin. So I work as a Senior Resourcing Advisor for BBC's Technology and Product Group, and I'm also the Reframing Disability Lead.
Fantastic. Great to have you here today. And Fiona.
Last but not least, good morning everyone. I'm Fiona Keane. I work with the commissioning team here in BBC Northern Ireland. I commission programmes across a broad range of content. It could be anything from arts to history to factual entertainment to hard-end documentaries. So it's great to be here and looking forward to this discussion this morning.
Fantastic. Let's have our other film. This one's by you, Kerry. Thank you.
My name is Kerry Burnell. I'm a mother, an actor, and a writer. In 2009, in the most exciting moment of my career to date,
Have you ever listened to a seashell?
I became a CBeebies presenter. Very quickly, I also became a news story.
Is it just me, or does anyone else think the new woman presenter on CBeebies, that's you, may scare the kids because of her disability?
This just highlights the kind of discrimination that disabled people face every day in every walk of life.
I certainly wasn't the first person with visible or non-visible disability to work for the BBC.
I'm Maggie Woolley.
But I was the first person with an upper limb difference who refused to wear a prosthetic on children's television. My story demonstrated there was a long way to go to normalise disability on screen.
Good to see you, Chris.
You too.
Since then, things have improved, but much more can still be done.
Really buzzing right now.
That's why the BBC have people like me working with commissioning and production teams to champion authentic on-screen portrayal of disability.
We force people to look at us in a different way.
I'm really passionate about this, and I'm so proud to be working with so many others in the industry to help disabled creatives be celebrated for what they do, not what they are perceived to be.
Hi, George!
After all, our job is to inform,
Formally.
educate,
Making sure disabled people can actually get into shops.
and entertain.
I love you. My goodness me. Oh, yeah. That was so special.
Yeah, that was certainly another moment last year, that's for sure. Kerry, what was it like putting that film together, first of all? You know, when you have such a central role in kind of championing the cause and increasing the visibility on screen, which is so important for people watching. If they can't see it, they can't be it.
Well, firstly, I just want to say that entire film, all of the VO was done over Zoom. So I just need to give a really big thank you and a shout out to the team who actually made the film here in Belfast. It was a spectacular effort, and I had nothing to do with it, really. In fact, in the spirit of inclusion, I think I should just audio describe myself as well for anyone who is visually impaired in our audience. So I am a white woman, I'm in my 40s, I've got quite a lot of makeup on today. I have an emerald green dress on and some jazzy gold shoes. I also have a disability, which is that I have one hand, which is normally referred to as having an upper limb difference, but that's a really long sentence when you're only 4. So I've always just called it having one hand. You're going to have to say the question to me again now. I can't remember what it was.
Well, I suppose it's that job of trying to increase the visibility on screen, which then has the knock-on effect for the audience. But in terms of the BBC, what is the BBC doing to try to increase that visibility and that inclusion?
Absolutely bloody loads, I would say. So just the appointment of myself and my 2 amazing colleagues, Kay Ashton and Nicola Garde, we form the disability team mainly for content, and we work within diversity and inclusion. And really the 3 of us together can provide some really sort of nuanced consultation for our commissioners and for our indies who are producing and making all of our brilliant content. And that can be really across the board. Obviously, we're not experts in every single disability, but when we pool our expertise together, you know, we can pretty much get everything covered. And obviously, we're widely supported by, you know, others in the creative and diversity unit. But if you think of something, you know, as subtle but as crucial as language, just getting the language right or wrong, you know, can really have a massive impact on a programme. And language is something that's always changing and evolving. And yes, sometimes we do get it wrong. You know, even a few weeks ago, I was in a primary school and I was talking about my dyslexia, which I referred to as a hidden disability, but that's actually not the correct term. So I've told the youth the wrong thing. It's actually a non-visible disability or visible disability. So, or is it a neurodivergency? You know, it's both, in fact. So there are many different ways that deaf, disabled, or neurodivergent crew and talent may identify. And our job is about trying to be as true to the person or the audience that we're reflecting.
And we do have this fund that's in place that means that you can use that to try to strengthen and develop the work you're doing.
We certainly do, and that is something that the commissioners can tap into and use to support our indies, so that we can... It's really about, I think, putting disabled creatives at the heart of our stories and making sure that we're telling really beautiful and nuanced and heartfelt and true to life stories. We also have an amazing scheme at the BBC called Elevate. Now, I know if you're a disabled person and you hear the word scheme, you probably think, oh my God, no, please, not another one. But this one is really brilliant, and it's just a fabulous initiative. It's a talent pipeline, really, to progress the careers of off-screen disabled talent and crew. It's headed up by Nicola Garde, and it's been really, really successful. And it's really just about removing the barriers so that actually off-screen disabled talent can just do their job and shine in the way that we would wish and expect them to.
Absolutely, and I suppose that's important because it's not just about the BBC as an organisation, it's the independent sector that we work with as well, because you can't have one without the other, and you need to have whatever inclusion strategies that we're having in both sectors. Carol, I'll come back to you before the end. Alan, we're talking about employees then. Obviously the BBC is a massive employer. What do you see as one of the most significant parts of your job? I know the passport is something very close to your heart. Tell us a bit more about how that works.
The passport was a concept that we implemented in the BBC back in 2019. Sorry, in essence, the way the passport works is it offers the employee a document whereby they can document, write down how their long-term health condition, whether that's something that's visible or invisible, affects them in their daily work. And it also gives them the opportunity to perhaps also document any adjustments that they might have. So the idea of this is essentially is that it moves around with you. If you change jobs, change managers, but ultimately it takes away the awkwardness of having the type of conversations you might have to have as a disabled person with someone in work, where it can be uncomfortable. You know, you might miss a bit, you might not give enough detail or too much detail, make the other person uncomfortable. So it's quite a good way of getting that, and over time, the notion is that it will help build relationships within the organisation. When the line managers and staff perhaps revisit the passport at regular intervals to see if there's been a change in circumstances, the conversations can then move more towards things like, how do we get you more career development? How can we get you involved in certain other things? Would you like to do X?
Yes.
You know, so you can the manager then can then see how the impairment affects the employee, and then help develop them accordingly. You know.
And I can imagine, Alan, part of that is so that you don't have to repeat yourself time and time again and explain time and time again to different people that you're working with. So that kind of information can be disseminated in a slightly easier way for everybody.
It does, but I think it's important to make the point here that the passport is, with it outside in business, now seen as a bit like a game changer, a shifting of the dial. So it's not just within the creatives in terms of the BBC, and we've worked with other broadcasters to help get this initiative taken up pan-industry. But wider than that, Department of Work and Pensions now see the passport as a valuable commodity, if you like, to helping people, you know, supporting people that are long-term unemployed, supporting people that are students. And I think what will happen in the longer term is they'll really start to impact this initiative into children that are maybe in year 10 and year 11 at school.
Yeah.
So the next generation of disabled young people that come into the employment market will be much more fully versed in how to articulate their impairment than the generation that we're seeing now and before that. But the last point I would make on that is that the passport, although it's seen as a mechanism of shifting the dial, it doesn't really work very well unless the organisations and business in general have a range of other initiatives that underpin what the passport does. And that can be things like awareness training, direct pathways into the industry, Kerry mentioned earlier on, and those can be things like apprenticeships or placements or schemes that offer training with a full-time contract after it. So we do a lot of things like that at the BBC. We offer training, we offer an allies programme where we go around and we have informal discussions away from a training environment to help managers and staff understand what it is to be a disability ally as well. So we've got a lot of things going on.
Sounds like a fantastic initiative. I'll come back to you before the end. Sharman, I suppose, the work that you're doing, tell us a little bit more about that. And if you just keep your mic quite far up, because just to make sure everybody can hear and online as well.
Yeah, so I work as a Reframing Disability Lead for as part of the 50/50 project. One of the strands of the 50/50 project is disability monitoring, so trying to increase that representation of disabilities within our content and output. This is where sort of the training comes in to support teams on how to go about doing that. So in the training, it's quite an interactive session, and we cover quite a lot of subjects within that. So we look at why representation of disabled people in the media is important. We look at good and bad representation using real-life case studies, and sort of open up a discussion and using the training as sort of a safe space to give our learners sort of the space to ask any questions they might not feel comfortable asking, say, in like a team meeting, for example. We also explore how to go about diversifying those spokespeople and offering reasonable adjustments as well. So with that, the aim is to sort of help teams slowly become more comfortable being able to increase that disability representation within their output.
Fantastic, thank you. Fiona, I mean, let's talk about commissioning and targets. I know Adam and Kerry have both mentioned that. How does that, what does that look like in Northern Ireland?
Well, I just wanted to say that unlike Adam, I'm a relatively new joiner to the BBC, and in the 5 years since I've joined the organisation, I've seen a real gathering momentum, a lot more discussion around portrayal and representation, and a real desire to make change in how we make what we offer for our audiences more diverse and inclusive. So a lot of the programmes you'll have hopefully enjoyed on the Beeb started their journey to the screen when somebody like me said, yes, I love this idea. And then we would ask questions about who will tell the story, who are we telling it for, how are we going to tell it, and why are we telling it now? So 5 years ago when I joined, there was already a pretty rigorous set of procedures around new commissions. Things like editorial, casting, technical matters, storytelling techniques, visual style. All of these things were discussed and wrapped into formal contracts. But as a broadcaster, we wanted to do better. We wanted to learn and grow so that in terms of representation and portrayal, our content could also reach that gold standard that Adam was talking about earlier on. The BBC, as we've heard, is a huge organisation employing a vast number of people, but ultimately it exists to serve the audience, and commissioning is a really, really important part of that. So we have a centrally committed pot of money, a commissioning spend of £100 million, which is going to be rolled out, which is already happening, being rolled out across 3 years. And all of the divisions in the BBC, across the nations and regions, we're all playing our part in that. With the guidance of a new creative diversity team, we took a really hard look at ourselves, at what we had been offering our licence fee payers, and we asked how we could do it better. So commissioners like me, well, we're lucky now that we now have a new toolkit, and we can measure and assess diversity in every new commission from the point of commissioning and follow that right through to broadcast. We have formal targets that are already beginning to have an impact, both in front of and behind the camera. Targets that independent suppliers simply have to meet if they want that BBC commission. Slowly but surely, we are seeing change across the production sector and a growing realisation and awareness from our suppliers that diversity and inclusive storytelling, it's not just a public service must-have, it makes for brilliant programming. Moments of magic and that really connect with the audience in meaningful and sometimes important and really beautiful ways. So I just wanted to quickly mention our flagship documentary series, a local one here on BBC Northern Ireland that's called True North. It's in its 13th run at the moment, and it's hugely popular with our local audiences. You'll have seen quite a few people whose stories featured in the last season, which was equally as important and popular with our local audiences as anything that's gone out so far. So in the last run, our viewers were taken behind the scenes of the Miss Ireland competition, or Miss Northern Ireland, beg your pardon, Miss Northern Ireland beauty contest with the amputee model and campaigner Bernadette Higgins. They spent quality family time at home with Cara Maley and her family. They found out just what it takes to start for the very first time a pride march in a rural Ulster community where the like had never before been seen. So each of these programs, each of these individual stories was delivered by an independent supplier. They were individual stories, but they were presented to our audience as part of a series in prime time slots. Popular, important, repeated content that sat on the iPlayer and was broadly publicised by our comms team. I like to think we're very, very proud of True North. That was an example of just how much of an impact diverse and inclusive storytelling can have that last season. But for me, it sort of sums up the BBC in microcosm, because True North was designed and commissioned in the very first series, 13 series ago, to tell the story of us, to tell the story of this place, to reflect who we are, to create on screen a mosaic of life in Northern Ireland. And that's kind of like what the BBC does across all its platforms with all its content. It tells our stories. So True North is also a point on the compass, a place that you look towards to plot your course and to find your path. And if I could paraphrase what Bernadette said in the film that you saw earlier on, watch us go.
Fiona, thanks very much. And yeah, I mean, I remember one of the films last year which starred James Martin was one of the best TV programmes I watched in the whole year. Just fantastic. As you say, it creates beautiful programming. Kerry, Fiona touched on it there, but as an industry whole then, how does the BBC fit into that attempt to make this an industry-wide initiative?
Well, Hello. Firstly, I loved what Fiona said about actually when you give, deaf, disabled and neurodivergent or just diverse creatives the power to create stories, it's actually really excellent content. And it's not just about being inclusive because it's a target or, for the sake of it or, because that's what people think they have to do. It's about making work that moves people and resonates and reflects all of the communities that we serve. And I think, the BBC is obviously the best broadcaster. But beyond that, we are working with many other broadcasters and pan-industry, really, to really try and change the culture around inclusion and make sure that everyone not just sees themselves represented, but can find their place within the industry. One thing we have coming up, which is really exciting, is a collaboration with Netflix, where we are looking for 3 commissions from disabled writers, but the storyline, the characters, the plot, the world that the story is set in can be anything. So they're not being pigeonholed into telling just disabled storylines. Because so often, in my earlier TV career, I would be sent scripts and the character would be amputee and that would be the character. And you'd think, well, that no one's disability or no one's diversity is their character. We're all people, we all have lives. We're interesting, get to know us, find out. And I think by giving deaf, disabled and neurodivergent creatives the power to tell those stories, that, to come back to Fiona's point, that is how you just make groundbreaking, absolutely phenomenal show-stopping content.
Fantastic. I know we're almost out of time. I want to give the last word to you, Alan. When it comes to the future then, what do you see as the one thing that the BBC is kind of leading the way in when it comes to employing and nurturing people with disabilities?
Probably to kind of offer more direct pathways into the industry. I think that's key. Because like I was saying before, I think the passport, as an example, won't really work as well unless there's opportunities there, you know. So I think that's what we must strive to really do. That should be a blend of things, so for covering in front of, behind the camera, craft roles, journalism, you know, lots of different, it gives lots of different avenues. So as the state broadcaster, we should be seen to be right at the forefront of that, I'd say.
Leading the way. Thanks very much. Thanks to all the panel. And we'll leave you with a little film.
I think I love you.
Are you gonna laugh?
I've been hearing symphonies. Before all I heard was silence.
Hello?
He knows what to say, but he just having trouble saying it.
Am I invisible?
Have a good long look.
How long have you got?
I don't mind disability, but I don't want to deal with it at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, for God's sake!
Our ability to adapt is phenomenal.
Please don't tackle me.
He can do it, but it's whether that injury holds him back.
This is my little terrible strip.
Whatever it took, we were gonna win.
I think you should do whatever empowers you.
Watch me do it.
I refuse to let it define me.
This is me.
Yes!
Nothing about us without us.
Inclusion is something everybody wants.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break, allow people to move to their next session, and then we'll be back here at 11:30 sharp for the PayPal session. Thank you so much.